Welcome to the World Football Summit podcast, the show for football industry leaders who want to stay ahead of the game. We bring you the latest insights, trends, and stories from the experts driving innovation and progress in sports business worldwide. Join us as we dive deep into the ideas and initiatives transforming the world of football. From sustainability and innovation to player development, fan engagement, and everything in between. Our goal is to unite the global football industry and drive positive change and progress. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, CMO at World Football Summit. Today, we have a very special guest, Nicole Allison, a prime example of a female leader driving change in women's football. With an amazing career that spans across consulting, media, notable roles at Tottenham Hotspur, the English Football League, and now as a proud owner of Worcester City Women FC, Nicole truly embodies the spirit of the game. In this conversation, we delve deep into the intriguing evolution of women's football and Nicole's staunch belief in investing at the grassroots level to propel the game forward. Her inspiring journey to Worcester City and the club's mission to create an impact that transcends beyond football. The trials and triumphs of helming a football club. And lastly, Nicole imparts invaluable leadership wisdom, a must-hear for women aspiring to leave their mark in this industry. Get ready to explore the inspiring world of women's football and leadership through Nicole's unique lens in this episode. By the way, Nicole has saved the date for WFS Europe, taking place in Sevilla on September 20th and 21st. Will you join us? We've launched a special ticket for female leaders in sports, offering access to exclusive workshops with industry leaders, unique discounts, and more. If you're ready to take the next step in your sports industry career, don't miss this opportunity. Visit www.worldfootballsummit.com to submit your request. Again, that's www.worldfootballsummit.com. And now, sit back and enjoy our conversation with Nicole Allison from Worcester City FC. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for joining us on the World Football Summit podcast. It's great to have you. I think we're going to have a great conversation about women's football, about what it takes to build a women's football club and leadership. I mean, I think it's going to be amazing. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, pleasure to be here. And looking forward to chatting. There's quite a few different subjects within that, as you said, and hopefully I can share some of my experiences that will be interesting to the listeners.
I'm sure. I just hope we don't run out of time. Before we go into all the different topics, Nicole, I was wondering if you could introduce yourself. And I guess I want to ask you, why is it that you do what you do?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so I am co-owner and CEO of Worcester City Women Football Club. So that means that I am fully responsible for all the day-to-day operations, strategic growth of my local football team. We'll talk more, obviously, in the session about how I kind of came to being owning my own football club. But for me, I mean, I was a football player. Football's always been a huge part of my life. I've been a coach. I then went into the business side of the game about 12, 13 years ago. Did a master's degree in football business, of which I was only one of few females doing that at that time. And then since then, I've been lucky enough to have a career working at agency side, at rights holder side, club side, as a consultant, as an agent, numerous different paths and numerous different roles, which has then kind of led me to this role. And I wear a number of different hats still. So I still do a lot of different teaching, still work with a lot of players at the top level as well, mainly in their off-pitch careers. But the kind of focus for the last 2 years has been developing and growing my own football club. So it's been quite a journey for the last 2 years, particularly. In terms of my why, specifically related to Worcester, I'm from Worcester originally. So for me, growing up in this city of 100,000 odd people, there wasn't a huge amount of opportunities to play football at all. particularly at a more competitive level. So if you were a talented player, there wasn't really anywhere for you to go other than to travel some significant distances into Birmingham, Wolverhampton, or even further south to Bristol if you wanted to really challenge yourself and push as far as you could. I was fortunate enough to have parents that could take me to Wolverhampton, which is where I played most of my career. But as I've kind of got older and worked in the industry and worked in women's football, particularly over the last 5-6 years, you recognise how actually fortunate I was that I did have parents that not just had the financial capabilities, but also the time and the ability to be flexible around work schedules to take me to training 3 times a week and on matches at weekends where we were travelling up to Durham, up to Middlesbrough, Newcastle regularly. So it was some serious commitment. And that's been something that has been driving me for a number of years now to want to make a change, want to make a positive impact into the city of Worcester and the surrounding areas to ensure that there are those opportunities for young girls as they're growing up to actually be able to play at a high level, to compete and to push themselves as far as they can possibly go.
That's an amazing answer because, I mean, at the end of the day, you've had an amazing career so far. You've been all over the place, so you've been in the English Football League, you've been at Tottenham, you've been a consultant, and now you decide to, create impact more from, let's say, the social side, if you will, right? So I was wondering, before speaking about women's football, would you use a word or 2, 3 words to describe your career? I know it's difficult, but I don't know if you've ever thought about that.
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. I think I would say evolving is certainly one word I would use to describe it because, I'm still fairly young, so I would certainly wouldn't say my career has kind of reached its full potential even right now. So it's a career that's always evolved. And it was certainly one that wasn't planned, so I would use unplanned as a word as well. And I think that's something that I often try and tell, people, particularly females that are wanting to work in the industry, because I think they feel maybe that they have to have a plan or that they know what routes to go down to get into the industry. And when I was playing football and coaching football and was thinking about studying, there weren't really the opportunities, there weren't the role models that I could look up to and think, hey, that person's taken this route and this path, this is what I can do. I just took every opportunity that I could and worked hard, maintained relationships with people, and as a result, doors have opened. And that's always advice that I would give to a lot of people. So it's been a varied career, as you said. I've been fortunate enough to actually do lots of different things, and I've taken things that I've enjoyed, maybe things that I've not enjoyed so much from each experience, and then tried to move on to the next thing as a evolution, really. So it's been very varied. It's been challenging, but I like that. I think that's where growth comes from. So that's why then I've been privileged really to work in the game and be in this position of being able to make some impact, from a social perspective as well, and to do that in my sort of home town and home city and come back to Worcester is something that's very special to me. And like I said, it's a privilege.
Evolving. I love that word because to me, it's not only, it also reflects not only what you've said, but a mindset that the journey continues. And also, I guess, ambition in a way of looking forward to what comes in the future, no? So thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I think so. And I've always had that mindset because, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what curveballs are going to come at you. And I think if you are open-minded and you're open to evolving and you're adaptable and you're flexible, then you can make the best out of situations, even if they're even the most challenging ones. So yeah, thank you for that.
If you think about it, it's like a football match. You may have everything planned, you may have all the tactics, the strategy, but then when you start playing, things just happen and you have to evolve as the match goes on, no? So yeah, good similarities there. So Nicole, I think, well, I was going to say, we're in the season to speak about women's football, but if you think about it, we're in the year or the years. Thankfully, finally, it's picking up. So I want to start with a quote from Ariana Cristione from Next Sports, who we also interviewed in the Female Leadership in Football initiative that we're carrying out here on the podcast. And basically, she said that 2022 was the year of visibility for women's football, while 2023 has to be the year of accessibility. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think great quote. And, Ariana's done some great work in the industry and continues to make a lot of change as well, and positive change in that. And I think what we need to see develop from that visibility, the increased visibility that we've seen, across the world in women's football over the last few years, thanks to, some major competitions, is how we take that growth into the domestic leagues and competitions of those different countries, and how do we make football more accessible? How do we ensure equal opportunities for girls? And I think that's a conversation that is happening, across the board. Here in the UK, even straight after the Lionesses won the Euros last summer, instantly we started talking about the unequal opportunities in schools. And we saw that shift in talking about accessibility, driven a lot from the players as well. And we've seen that continue. We've seen further investment and funding then into, and I suppose commitment through that, into how do we provide equal opportunities. And of course, then, accessibility is something that we need to not just throw money at, but we need to think strategically about how do we make the game more accessible for the lower ends of the football pyramid as well, which of course is where I'm currently working, and that's over the last 2 years it's been a bit of a change for me, having worked previously more in the elite and top end of the football pyramid, both men's and women's. So I've learned a lot about the grassroots side and actually how we need to improve that to ensure increased accessibility, because without that, we don't have the foundations to grow again and to grow an ecosystem. So I would agree with that quote. But of course, it all goes hand in hand. It's important to ensure that visibility grows as well, not just at the very top level, but that sort of trickles down into the lower ends as well.
Yeah, and I was actually curious, because lately you've seen the rise of, the Women's Super League in the UK, the Women's Champions League with sellout crowds. So at the end of the day, it's just so much investment coming into the women's game finally, But how, of course, what is the benefit the benefit that you've seen for Worcester from that momentum that's been created?
Yeah, I think it's been the additional interest, and it's been the fact that people are more aware of women's football, that it's a career opportunity for their daughters, granddaughters, and it's now not just considered sort of when I was growing up as just being the kind of the odd girl that played football in the school team. It's now actually respected a lot more. I'm not going to say that everybody fully respects it yet. We've still got quite a long way to go on that, but it's certainly getting there. And I think the fact that we've had that success at those top levels allows us to educate more people about the game, about the industry as well. So on a personal level, we've had a lot more interest, not just from players, but also coaches, local sponsors, partnerships. We've been really pleased with how engaged those people have been, and not just because they want to financially support us, but actually because they want to give back to the community, and that's been most pleasing. And compared to when I worked in the men's game, the conversations around sponsorship and partnerships are very different. It's a lot more led by engagement and impact as opposed to eyeballs when it's been in the men's game. So it has certainly benefited us. But where we haven't seen direct benefit is through that financial support from the governing bodies, for example. That doesn't get to our level yet. And that's something that I would definitely like to see. Even when we talk about FA Cup and equal prize money, whilst the prize money has increased in the Women's FA Cup, and that's been a huge help to a number of different clubs, again, at the lower end of the pyramid. We'd like to see more, and I think it should be more.
Yeah, agree. I think the road ahead is still long, no? And while we see many great things happening around the women's game and the industry in general, of course, there's still many challenges other than the financials that you just described, no? What are other challenges? I was just thinking, that you believe are most, relevant to the industry today? And I guess more importantly, how can the entire ecosystem work together to solve them?
Yeah, there's certainly a number of different challenges. The one that I come across the most, we're talking with clubs at our level in terms of with Worcester City Women at the moment, is sustainability, financial sustainability, and that, I suppose, ownership structure. There's quite a lot of, I think, issues around clubs that are either associated or integrated with their men's team, and particularly lower down the pyramid, that's often not been looked at. And so you will often have women's teams that are just tagged on to the men's team, but perhaps don't really have their own area of growth. They don't have their own strategy. They don't have their own advisory board or people that are specifically there to grow the women's game. And I think that's a challenge. I think there's been some people and conversations that I've had where we talk a bit about, is it just a tick box? Is it just something that clubs are doing because they feel they have to, as opposed to actually believing in a long-term investment into the women's game? And one of the reasons why I set Worcester City Women out as an independent football club, we're not associated with a men's football club. We are separate. We are financially sustainable. We are ran and owned completely separately to the Worcester City men's team. And whilst we have strong kind of connections with them, we are individual. We have our own strategy. We don't share facilities as such. We're completely separate. That was done on purpose. That was done because we want to be that blueprint and to show other clubs that you can do this if you employ a long-term plan and you stick to what your vision and mission is, and you take every step properly. And I think a lot of the challenges that I see other clubs have is around almost that kind of battle for ownership and power. And alongside that then comes the financial issues and the financial question mark over, ultimately, if a men's team is doing particularly well at that time and they can put more money into the women's team, but what happens when those fortunes change and maybe on the pitch they don't do so well, there's relegations or there's not a cup run, where does that money then get pulled from? Quite often it's the women's team. So it's, for me, if I was part of a club that was associated in that way or completely tied up within a men's team, I would be concerned as to, are we really in control of our own destiny here? So that sustainability element is definitely a challenge. And I think, just kind of general continuous leadership and education and getting more women in the industry and into leadership positions and decision-making positions. And that's on top of, the kind of question around unequal pay, opportunities, facilities and things that we've mentioned before.
All right, thank you for that detailed answer. And I agree. I think, and you hear a lot, sustainability is a key piece and growing profitably. You want to avoid some of the mistakes that you see happening in the men's game, if you will, where it's just focused on growth, and you never know when, if that bubble is going to explode. And I think now is the time to actually build solid foundations at a professional side as well, business, let's say, professional.
Definitely. My experience of being in the men's game is that it's often built on short-term visions and short-term strategies. And I wouldn't want the women's game to go down that route. We know that in order to grow the women's game sustainably, we have to see this as a long-term investment. And it's still very much early days, considering what we know about the history of the women's game compared to the history of the men's game. There's still those foundations that need to be set and need to be laid. So thinking about it long term as opposed to short term, and football is so used to focusing on short-term results and being very focused on winning, whereas sort of changing that mindset and thinking about actually the processes, and then getting those processes and foundations right, the outcome will be winning. The outcome will be whatever you label as success. But I think the danger of being similar in the sense to how some men's football clubs have been, particularly in the past, is focusing too much on short-term gains and having a strategy built around purely winning.
I guess it must be tempting, it requires discipline at the end of the day, because you see the momentum, you see everybody being very excited about the potential of women's football, and you see money coming in, and I guess it's just tempting to, let's say, grab the money and run. But I think it requires a lot of discipline to actually lay the foundations and do things right, because in the long term, it's just going to be much better for the sport. No?
Absolutely. Yeah. I often talk about it with our staff and players, in that, it's like what we're trying to do at Worcester City Women is a long-term project, and say there's 100 steps that we need to take. We can't go from step 5 and then suddenly jump to step 20. We have to take step 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and the rest. We can't miss one, because that's all about laying those foundations. And, that fits around all different elements of our strategy, from creating a high performance environment to developing and engaging the community, to growing our brand and our revenue structures. All of that is about taking each step at a time and doing things gradually. Yeah.
And in that sense, how do you see women's football evolving? And I guess specifically, what role do more quote unquote humble clubs like Worcester play into that evolution?
I think we're vital to ensure that the pyramid continues to grow and that we continue to develop players. Obviously, at the top end, if we look at even just in England, to start off with, the Women's Super League and the Championship, most of those clubs now are integrated with a Premier League club. And, obviously there's all the talks about the Women's Super League going off and being owned by a separate entity. We're starting to see those gaps get a little bit bigger, even discussion about maybe it being a closed league. There's obviously a review going on at the moment. I think we need to remember how important clubs like ours are at actually creating those players and the talent that can then go into those elite tiers of tier 1 and 2, because without clubs like us, those players simply, don't get developed. They don't get found. They don't get supported. So we're crucial to that, and I think that's why I'd like to see more support or more strategic planning around how do we support, not just financially, but from a strategic perspective, from a business perspective. How do we support those teams at the sort of tiers 7, 6, and 5?
It goes back to what we were saying before about accessibility. I guess that's the key word, no? And I think that's the role that clubs can play, and so fundamental for growth of the game, no? Definitely. And I think, it's about the being across the country, and we use England as an example, but it's every country across the world. You want to have true accessibility. You need every city and town to have women's football clubs, from grassroots and all the way through to playing at the highest kind of possible level. You want to increase that. So we also then need to see the opportunities and see the support that other teams can get from the national governing bodies, from sponsors, from brands, from investors as well. We need to see that support coming, so that more and more clubs are encouraged to actually start and develop sustainably. It's funny, because I was just having a conversation with the person that helps us edit the podcast. He runs a club here in Madrid called it's Football Club Malasaña, and he wants to start a women's football team, and he was saying that pretty much the same thing. We need, facilities, we need resources, we need kits, we need everything. And you would think it's easy, but he's finding so many challenges. So it's just amazing. But yeah. It is often those operational aspects as well, like you said, the facilities, the kit, the equipment,
that's difficult. And when you don't own your own facilities or have those assets, you need to engage with the local communities and the stakeholders that are going to be key to creating and developing more facilities. And that is a constant challenge.
Yeah, it is. So moving on, Nicole, I want to understand more about your road to Worcester. And you've already talked about your why. I was curious, how has your experience so far prepared you for your role and what you do today?
I think it kind of, goes back to, I suppose, that evolving word and being adaptable and being flexible, and taking kind of, what comes, and having the ability sometimes to just take a step back, not react in certain moments, but actually really consider situations, and then, your choice of how you react to challenging situations or opportunities are then key in terms of what path you then take. So I would say from all of the different roles that I've had in the industry, I've learned how to develop relationships, and I've learned how to manage people. And that's a huge amount of what I do right now at Worcester City Women. And even though we are a volunteer-led club, obviously we are going to be transitioning into a club that is professional in the sense that we will start to pay people and employ people. That's the vision, that's the aim. Right now, where we're at, still building those foundations, is still volunteer-led. But I have over 100 people that are involved in the club in some way, from players, coaches, match day, stewards, volunteers, safeguarding, club treasurers, sponsors. It's huge. And so managing all of those different people and taking them on the journey that we're going on is a huge part of my job. And so I think I've learned a lot and taken a lot of experience from when I worked at Kantar Media. A huge part of my job was client management, so client servicing and things like that, understanding clients and other people's challenges and the business that they're in, really getting to grips with that, and then being quite solution focused. To then working at a rights holder in terms of the EFL, and then of course in a club environment, and how you manage the personalities in a football club can be quite difficult at times. But I would say, what's always been really important to me is understanding my own personal values and not straying far away from that. And we've tried to replicate that in terms of how the club works as well. So we have our own set values. Everybody knows what they are, and we ensure that we stick to those. And that's something that we constantly communicate with the players and the staff and everybody that's involved in the club. So for me, the key ones personally are integrity, tolerance, and being humble. So with those three in mind, I've sort of navigated my career and taken all of those different experiences whilst remaining always kind of true to those personal values. And that certainly helped me lead Worcester City Women to where we are now, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so. But absolutely make no mistake, it's certainly not just me leading this. This is a huge group effort of, as I said, a lot of people that are involved in the club.
I was actually going to ask, because there's one thing, or it's one thing to be or have self-motivation. And even if you run a volunteer-led club, let's say, and you start with the premise that these people are motivated to actually make an impact, I'm sure there have been many challenging situations. And I don't know if there's any specific example you can share of how you led the group through a challenging situation at some point.
We have a constant challenge being volunteer-led of how do we manage people's time, because it's not like we can all get together, sit and discuss, if there's an issue or if there's something that we need to plan for. Often we have to do communications via WhatsApp voice notes. It's all at different times. You've got coaches and managers that are juggling full-time work, running businesses, young families as well. And sometimes, particularly when you're in an industry like football, and say you're not getting the results on the pitch that you want, or you're not getting the results that you feel that you deserve, that can be challenging to keep motivating, keep driving people. But I always say to every single person that is involved in the club, Worcester City Women has to add value to your life. And if at any point it doesn't feel like it's adding value, then there's a problem. You need to come to me. We need to talk about how do we either change that or also be open and recognize that just sometimes in occasions, people's lives and their work-life balance means that actually maybe this isn't the right time for them to be involved in the club. And everyone's always been really honest with me and very clear that they understand the direction. They're absolutely bought into the project that we're doing here. So even when there's tough times, they take a step back, remember that actually this is about adding value, not just to their life, but to other people's lives. And it comes back down to if something is aligned with your own personal values, no matter how difficult the challenge is, you can always come back to that and you rebuild and you start again. And it comes down to recruitment of people and ensuring that there are no egos within the group. Everybody is there to support each other. And that's been probably a very proud moment for me in that we've built a team of people that all have a huge amount of togetherness. And actually, a really good live example is we played a cup final on Sunday. We lost 4-2 on penalties. So obviously everybody is disappointed. We felt like after the season that we've had, we really deserved some silverware and a trophy to come away from that. But it wasn't meant to be on the day. But actually, whilst we're disappointed, you're not completely deflated because you can see how much growth we've had as a group and everybody rallies round together, and the attitude is actually about what can we take from that defeat, and we always take something from a challenge and from a loss, and that's the mindset piece again that you have to have right. So we have a great togetherness as the group, and the motivation, I'm not responsible for motivating other people because I can't be. I can only be responsible for motivating myself. But it's the understanding around the group that we're all there to support, and that ensures that people's self-motivation is there and exists.
Yeah, and I think that you guys also believe in something that's greater than yourselves. And that reminds me of a book called Tribal Leadership, and they describe the different phases of leadership and let's say the top, which is where the most successful teams perform. That's kind of like the mindset they have. They go beyond individual motivation to a group motivation that goes beyond or creating impact beyond oneself and even beyond, in terms of business, competition. It's just we want to make a positive impact in the world. And I think that's what you guys are pursuing. So congratulations on that. Very interesting.
Definitely. Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great way of describing what we're about. And I suppose whenever I talk to a potential new recruit, whether that's a player or a coach or anybody, as I said, stewards, people that are, stood on our ticket gate on a match day, things like that, it's all part of being part of something bigger, and they all understand that. And I treat that recruitment process, whether you're the coach, driver, or our top goal scorer, exactly the same way, because everybody is crucial to the growth and the development of the club. And that comes down to the first actually value within our club, which is respect. We ensure that everybody respects each other, respects themselves, respects our competitors, and we have no tolerance of anything different.
Okay. And obviously we cannot be remiss to the fact that running a football club has its financial challenges. So how do you balance that? I mean, how do you balance trying to be a sustainable, from the economic side that you said before, so a sustainable club, with the ambition to grow, to achieve good results, to be there for the fans? So how do you balance all of that?
Yeah, it's a real tough one, if I'm honest, because as you alluded to before, one of the biggest challenges is facilities, especially when you don't own them. They're incredibly expensive wherever you are. That's a huge drain on our financial resource. And ultimately, our support comes from sponsors and partners, and that's how we grow. That's how we are sustainable. And I've managed to build relationships with those that, as you said, they want to be aligned with a club that is some part of something bigger. That's not just a group of people that turn up on a Sunday and kick a ball about. It's we've been really successful with that approach because we deliver a huge amount of value back to those sponsors as well. Not in the traditional metric of eyeballs, but in the metric of engagement and social impact. And so aligning ourselves with the right sponsors and the right investment is crucial. So we're in a fortunate position where we, have sponsors that are in it with us for the long term. So that goes back to that point of long-term growth and sustainability, so that then we can focus on all of the things that we need to focus on to build the foundation. So it's a constant. You have to constantly look at where your finances are, what's, ensuring that you're able to cope with any curveballs that might, come into place. And we can't forget the fact that, COVID-19 happened a few years ago and we weren't all expecting that. And, the impact that has on clubs of our level as well is huge. So you have to constantly be mindful of what might happen and being prepared for that. And then you also have to think about how do we gradually start diversifying our revenue streams and how do we keep growing that in a sustainable way? We don't obviously have the revenue streams like broadcasting rights that a lot of clubs at the top level will start to rely on. We are still working on how do we, make our match day profitable, for example, and how do we create that fan engagement and a fan experience that will help us keep growing our attendance. And ultimately, that's crucial for us. And that then links to facilities as well. So you need to be in a facility that will allow you to grow and allow you to become profitable in that space. So it's a constant balance. And I think it's about being cautious. You need to ensure that you spend your budget on those foundations as opposed to something that might be a bit more short term. And I think some of them maybe some clubs at our level get tempted by thinking, well, how can I actually attract that player that's banging in 30 goals a season to come over to us? Well, maybe I could just offer them a bit of cash. No one will know. But actually, the moment you do that for one player or two players, you start to straight away have an unbalanced team. You go, certainly that would be going away from our values and our mission and our direction. So the investment for us is about providing all of the players, all of the coaches with the best facilities, the best tools to do the best job that they can do at training and on a match day. And as I said, that's us focusing on the processes, and the right outcome will then be there. So it's a balance. It's about being cautious. It's about being sensible. And it all comes down to having a long-term strategy and knowing what you're trying to achieve.
That was a great answer, because I was actually going to ask you, before we move on to the next section of the conversation, about advice that you had for other people looking to grow their women's football football team. And unless you have any other piece of advice that you want to share that you find interesting, I guess we can move on. So
yeah, I think, my key thing there would be a strategy and ensuring that you communicate that well to everybody. That's my advice. If you were starting something, completely from scratch, you've got to be really clear on what your vision is, and everybody then as part of the club needs to know that, because there will be times when people won't agree, or people you kind of, is everybody on the bus, and your direction of growth and your vision is where you've said it's going to be. People are either on that bus or off that bus, and you need to be really clear with that. So I think my main advice for anybody is having that clarity of purpose and vision.
Yeah, and communication is just key. And you have to really insist on it, because you can't assume that just because you say it one time, people are going to understand. So you really have to bring those messages constantly, very simple messages and very constant in terms of where's your vision and your purpose. No? All right, fantastic. So one last section that I want to cover before we close the episode, Nicole, is leadership. Because to me, in a way, you're a trailblazer. And I want to understand from your point of view, what does it take to be a trailblazer?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, it's very nice to hear. I mean, I suppose I've not really thought about it. And one of the things that I know I probably need to work on myself is a bit of the work-life balance element. And I've been very open with people about that. I do work a lot, and sometimes you need to take that step back to realize actually sometimes how quite far you've come and how much you've achieved. I would say, if I really think about why I've been so successful, or why I'm in, the privileged position that I'm in right now, is it kind of goes back to those personal values of integrity, tolerance, and humility. I think from a leadership perspective, if you always stick to those values or your own personal values, you bring people on a journey with you. And I've always been somebody that likes to develop people, like to empower people, and I thrive in that situation. So for me, being in charge of a football club where I can really make that impact on people, it's perfect for me, and I suppose I've kind of just fallen into that role in a sense, as opposed to, again, it being particularly planned, like my career as a whole. And I think for any leader, and I've obviously been around the game for quite some time, and I've experienced different leadership strategies, I suppose, from different people. But the ones where I've always thrived is when I felt like I'm treated with respect and I can approach people no matter what position they are in the organisation, and that people actually care about my development, my well-being. And I think if you can show people that you care and that you're empathetic, then you can't really go too far wrong.
Well, thank you for that. I think that's a nice answer that a lot of people can learn from, because it touches upon many things, especially values. I really like the fact that you focused on your values, and that's something that guides, I think, the best leaders that I've spoken to over all the episodes of the podcast. My take on that also is that I think there's a lot of people who actually have it in them to be a trailblazer themselves, but for some reason they just don't take the leap. So what advice would you have for those people that, I don't know if the word is afraid, but they just hesitate to actually take that leap? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I often think about when people do sometimes ask me, like, what made me go and start the master's course in football business. I moved from Worcester to London without even a job at that point or anywhere to live, and looking back, that was quite a scary kind of moment, really. But there was certainly something within me, probably ambition and I suppose an element of just self-motivation that you get things done, and a belief that things always work out in the way that they're supposed to. What I wish that I'd had when I was younger, which is therefore the advice that I would give people, is a mentor. Having somebody that you can reach out to, talk to, and for them to help kind of guide you would have been something I think would have helped me a huge amount in my career. So my advice to people that, are there and thinking they want to do something would be actually, have a think about and reach out to people that are in the area of work that you may want to be in, or that, might have had experiences, even if it's not even in the same industry, might have had experiences similar and backgrounds similar to yourself, and reach out to them and get yourself a mentor, get yourself somebody that you can speak with and that you can lean upon.
Yeah, I think the value of mentors is just amazing, because they guide you, they push you, they make you see where your potential is. So I agree 100%. And I want to tie that with my next question, which I guess I'm sure you get a lot of requests from students and young professionals for advice to enter the sports industry. So I don't know if you would have any particular advice for those kind of people that are actually looking to build a career in sports, in terms of, what are the skills or what are the experiences that they need to have to actually have that successful career?
Yeah, I mean, in the industry, I would say, similar to others, you need to have those transferable skills. You need to have good social skills and people skills. And we've talked about communication a lot over the last 45 minutes. Being able to communicate is crucial. So, the skill set it's far wider. I think some people that kind of just think that I like football, I played football, therefore I'm going to work in the football industry. And similarly, it works the other way, in that actually I get a lot of females that have never played football, and therefore think that they can't work in football because they've never actually been a participant, which I think is a barrier to then why we don't have females working in the industry as much. So the advice I often give to those is that, whether you've played or not, the industry still needs skilled people, and you can always gain skills from anything you do. A huge piece of advice, and one thing that has helped me, beyond really recognition, is the power of networking and maintaining relationships. So the master's degree that I did at Birkbeck University in central London, I did that part-time in the end whilst working. I was working at Kantar Media at the time. So it was 2 years of doing a degree alongside working in the industry, which just increased my network so much. It allowed me to go to different events, connect with people, but then the next bit is about how you then maintain those relationships, and that's not easy, whilst also doing your job, studying, having a life outside of all of that. But I've always made a commitment as well to help people in the way that others helped me, so that kind of mentorship aspect as well. And I enjoy doing a lot of mentoring myself, and I think there's a lot of people willing to help out there, but more people need to actually put themselves out there to build relationships and to network. So biggest thing that's helped me in my career is definitely networking and maintaining relationships. And that goes back to really that sort of question before around how do you take that next leap? A huge part of that is mentorship and searching for that mentor.
Yeah, networking is vital. And that's actually one of the main missions that we have at World Football Summit, is to enable that space for the industry to network, because that's where opportunities are created. And you can actually see it when you walk around the events and you speak with people and you ask them, why are you here? 70% of them, 80% of them, they tell me, I just want to network. I want to meet people. I want to challenge my thinking. I want to learn new things. I want to see new businesses. At the end of the day, I just want to get, to know other people. So couldn't agree more on that. So Nicole, I want to be respectful of your time, and we have a few minutes left. So I just have a few quick questions. First one being, it's been, if I get this right, over 2 years since you've been involved with Worcester. So what is the moment, if any, that you're most proud of?
Great question. I would say it was actually a moment with a couple of loyal fans of ours, a man and a woman who are really good friends. The guy, his best friend, was actually the husband of the woman that he now comes with, and sadly the husband died during COVID, and obviously created quite a few difficulties and challenges for both him and the wife. And it was actually hearing them talk about what coming to watch Worcester City Women does for them, for their own mental health, for their own well-being, for their own, being social, getting out of the house. That was probably the proudest moment for me, because I could see genuinely then the impact that we were making on people's lives. And that wasn't about goals, trophies, whether we'd beaten this team or that team, how many by. That was about genuinely changing somebody's life and making them better. And for these two particular fans coming, they follow us home, away, they follow our first team, their development team. They absolutely love coming to watch us play. I'm sort of picking out those two, but I know that there's numerous other fans and that feel the same way. Often come and tell me that they prefer watching us over men's football. It's a better atmosphere. It's a safer environment. It's better football. Those are the moments that I always take with me. And actually a great one on Sunday was coming back from our cup final defeat. We had a coach. It was a new coach company that we'd used actually, and the driver stopped at the end as dropping us off and just said to me, "Can I just have a few words?" So we quieted the music down, and the driver said, "I've never watched women's football before. I've always only ever watched men's football. But watching you girls today, you've inspired me to follow women's football." And that is, again, success. That's what we are here to do. We are a movement. We're not just about kicking a ball around. It's using football as a force for social good. So those have been my proudest moments generally. And we'll have many, many more of those, I'm sure.
Well, that was a great answer, not only because it proves the impact that football can have in life in general, but I think it also is a great demonstration of what we've discussed through the interview, which is basically that your mission goes beyond football, and how Worcester City, you're trying to create meaningful impact in people's lives. So that's, I think, a fantastic story that demonstrates that. So thank you for sharing that. And you just mentioned that you will have more moments like those in the future. So what's next? Where do you want to see the team in the next, let's say, 5-10 years?
Yeah, well, we're very ambitious. So, we want to rise through that pyramid. We're currently at tier 5 with our first team anyway. We are absolutely focused on promotion into tier 4, which would see us into the National League. National League is tier 3 and 4 in the English pyramid at the moment. So we want to be there as soon as we possibly can. That's the kind of focus in terms of a sort of more short to medium term plan. But aside from all of that kind of growth and progression on the pitch is how we then engage with the community even more. So, over the next 5 years, I want to see us into every school around Worcestershire. I want us regularly in those schools, coaching, developing boys and girls, giving them those equal opportunities and normalising women's football. So we want young boys growing up seeing girls playing, females playing, and knowing that that's completely normal. So we are educators as well as, a football club and football players. So that's really, really important for me. And equally seeing us transition into a football club that gives career opportunities, job opportunities to the people of Worcester. We've got a fantastic university in Worcester that has great sport courses, and we need to ensure that we create more jobs in this area in the sports industry. So we want to be a big delivery partner in that. We want to ensure that Worcester as a city has a professional and successful football club. And we want, as I said, I think at the beginning, that we want to be that blueprint for how to be an independent women's football club and do things the right way. So whilst I'm not putting any specific objectives and timelines on things, we maintain that objective of making a social impact, and we're already developing huge links with local communities and schools, and we want to do more of that. And of course, we need to ensure that we create a high performance environment to see us rise through that pyramid, and hopefully see us at the very top competing with the very best.
Hopefully. We'll root for that to happen from here. And is there another female leader in sports that you look up to?
I would say Maggie Murphy is certainly a standout for me, the CEO of Lewes FC. I think I love the narrative that Lewes have. I love what they're about. The leadership that Maggie has shown when she's been at Lewes Women, and then of course the CEO of Lewes Football Club as a whole, has been fantastic. So I was lucky enough to meet Maggie a couple of times when I worked at Tottenham, and Lewes had just come up into the Championship, but kind of following her journey and the impact that she makes is inspiring. So definitely Maggie Murphy from a female perspective, but I'd also like to mention a male leader that does a lot for the women's game in Paul Barber, CEO of Brighton. In terms of people watching, key people making big influences and big changes in the women's game, Paul is also one of those, and is a fantastic leader. So I would certainly mention those two.
Yeah, Maggie, she was a speaker at World Football Summit Europe last year, and she's a force. Her energy is just contagious. So I couldn't agree more on that. And hopefully, ever since then, I've been thinking I need to invite Maggie to the podcast. But I mean, obviously, it's difficult, but I guess I'll manage. And Paul, I mean, you just have to look at what Brighton is doing at all fronts. So the results are there, and nothing much more to say than to just look at the results and see how well he's doing. So
exactly, yeah, there's no other way of looking at it. And I think even if you look at Paul's career before he was even at Brighton as well, there's been sort of similar results. And I think the way that he leads a team and an organisation, conducts himself is a way that I often, look at and think, and how can I kind of be mentored by that sort of person?
And Nicole, one last question, and feel free to answer this one or not. And apologies if I put you on the spot here, but imagine you had unlimited budget and that you could, bring any player in history to Worcester City. Do you know who would that be?
Oh, that's a really good question. Any player in history. I mean, right now, a player that I really enjoy watching, it sounds a bit of an obvious one, but in terms of just even the character that she has, not just the goals that she scores, but Sam Kerr. I think, both for Chelsea and Australia, I love the vibe that she brings. And I think herself, she's a force in women's football and will continue to be when she, is a retired player. So I would look at it from a bigger picture point of not just because of the goals that she would score and the fact that she's one of the world's best players, but also looking at that future point, what she could do for a club like us, and the change that she could make. I think she'd be incredibly valuable, not just on the pitch, but off it as well.
Definitely. That's a good answer, because, you need heroes like that actually transcend what happens on the pitch and influence what happens off it. So anyway, Nicole, I want to thank you so much for this fun conversation. Just amazing. Are there any last words you want to share with the audience?
No, just thank you to yourself and World Football Summit for the time and for giving little old Worcester City women some airtime. And I hope that everybody's enjoyed listening. And if everybody wants to follow what we're doing, follow us on social media. If you just put in Worcester City Women FC, you'll find us. Website www.wcwfc.co.uk. And it'd be great to have people follow us on the journey, and I hope to be coming to World Football Summit to the events over the next year or so, and hopefully meet people there.
Oh yeah, we will be great to have you there, and it would be great to bring you back to the podcast when you guys are top of the game, and you tell us how the journey has been. So looking forward to that. Nicole, thank you so much, and I wish you the very best, and hopefully the second round comes soon.
Definitely. Thank you very much again. Much appreciated.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And there you have her, Nicole Allison, with a masterclass on women's football and leadership. Let's revisit some of the amazing wisdom Nicole shared with us today. She views her career as evolving, which speaks volumes about her growth mindset. It's a beautiful reminder for us all that the journey truly is the reward. She shared a critical insight about the need to boost resources for girls' football youth programs, a necessary step to grow the women's game. And to make this happen sustainably, the game must adopt a long-term perspective. What's Nicole's measure of success? Inspiring people to love women's football and using the sport as a tool for positive social change. She's not just about the game, she's about the impact it can have on the world. She also left us with some leadership advice. Clarity of purpose and vision, a clear strategy, and the ability to communicate it effectively are the building blocks for any thriving organization. I was reminded of a chat with Phil Kornichuk on the Finding Mastery podcast about good leadership. It's about self-awareness, having a clear purpose, and a set of values. Nicole lives by integrity, tolerance, and humility, and she embeds these values into her team. Did anything else stand out to you? If so, please connect with us on social media and let us know. Don't forget to subscribe, rate the podcast on your preferred platform, and share it with other industry colleagues. Follow us as we continue to celebrate female leadership in football with more incredible guests. That's all for this episode of the World Football Summit podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time.